Your numbers don't match our records, Deirdre from HR said, her voice colder than the conference room air conditioning. She slid a stack of papers across the polished wooden table. We believe you've been falsifying your results for quite some time. My new manager Vance leaned forward, his rehearsed sympathy failing to reach his eyes. We've conducted a thorough audit of the client acquisition reports. The discrepancies are significant. I stared at the termination papers, the black text blurring as my heart hammered against my ribs. 6 years. 6 years of early mornings and late nights, of canceled plans and missed family gatherings, of building something from nothing. Sign this and leave quietly, Deirdre continued, uncapping an expensive pen and placing it beside the document. We're prepared to offer 2 weeks severance if you cooperate. The conference room fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. Vance's wedding ring clinked against his water glass as he shifted uncomfortably. Deirdre's expression remained unchanged, practiced in the art of dismantling careers. I took a deep breath and felt my shoulders relax. Then I smiled. Before I do, I said, pulling out my phone, let me show you something interesting. The confusion on their faces was just the beginning of what would become my sweetest professional moment. My name is Eliza Moreno, I'm 34, and until that morning, I was the senior client relationship manager at a prestigious financial services firm that I won't name for obvious reasons. I'm the daughter of a public school teacher who lost everything in a workplace dispute without proof, and I learned early that in corporate America, documentation isn't just important, it's survival. Let me pause for a moment. Before I go any further, could you please take a few seconds to tell me in the comments where you are watching from? I want to know my story reached you, whether you're in Seattle or Singapore or somewhere in between. And also like and subscribe for more stories like this one, because trust me, corporate America is full of them. So there I was, sitting across from two people who thought they had all the power, who believed I would crumble and disappear. The termination papers waited for my signature, my surrender. Instead, I opened my email app and turned my phone toward them. 3 months ago, I noticed something odd. I explained, scrolling through a carefully organized folder. The numbers I was submitting weren't matching what appeared in the system later. At first, I thought it might be a glitch. Vance's expression shifted subtly. His left eye twitched. Being the detail-oriented person I am, I'd been blind copying my daily client reports to my personal email account for years. Just a habit I developed after watching my mother lose everything in a similar situation. Deirdre crossed her arms. Sending company data to personal accounts violates our Information Security Policy, Section 4.3. I finished for her, which has an exception for personal work logs maintained by employees for performance review purposes. I checked with legal when I started doing it. I pulled up a spreadsheet on my phone and placed it on the table. This is a record of every alteration made to my submitted reports over the past 8 months. The pattern is fascinating. My client acquisition statistics were systematically reduced by exactly 17%, while Connor Haverford's increased by similar amounts. Connor, my former colleague who'd been promoted over me 3 months ago despite having half my experience and client success rate. Connor who played golf with Vance every Sunday. Connor whose uncle sat on the board. I'm curious, I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Is it coincidence that these alterations began exactly when Vance took over our department? Or that every woman in our division has similar discrepancies? The color drained from Vance's face. Deirdre's professional mask slipped for just a second. These are serious accusations, she said, her voice noticeably less confident. They are, I agreed, which is why I've documented everything meticulously. The timestamps of my original submissions, screenshots of the altered records, the pattern of changes, and most interestingly, the system login credentials used to make those changes. I pulled up another document. This is a time-stamped record showing that the alterations were made using your administrative credentials, Vance. Always between 7:15 and 7:40 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, when you told the team you were staying late for system maintenance. The silence in the room was deafening. I continued. I also have emails from 5 female colleagues who experienced similar performance issues after you took over. None of our male counterparts had these problems. Vance's face contorted. You can't prove. I already have, I interrupted, pulling out a small USB drive. Everything is here, including a full timeline analysis. I sent copies to Marissa Chanot in the ethics office and Arthur Westman in legal 30 minutes ago. I leaned back in my chair. I didn't come here to be fired today. I came here to watch you try. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Arthur from legal appeared, grim-faced and clutching a folder. Marissa from ethics brought her assistant who took notes frantically. The regional director joined by video call, his weekend interrupted by what was quickly becoming a major situation. I sat through it all, answering questions calmly, presenting evidence methodically. The weight of 6 years of hard work, of doubting myself when my numbers didn't match my results, of watching less qualified men advance while I stagnated. It all crystallized into this moment of perfect clarity. How did you first notice the discrepancies? Arthur asked, adjusting his glasses. I've kept a personal work journal since I started here, I explained. Every client, every interaction, every outcome. When my quarterly reviews showed numbers below my targets despite what I knew I'd achieved, I started investigating. And you believe this was deliberate manipulation to justify promoting Mr. Haverford instead of you? Marissa clarified. The evidence suggests it wasn't just me, I replied. Tanya in healthcare accounts, Zoe in retirement services, Imani in estate planning, and Rebecca in commercial lending all experienced similar performance issues under Vance's management. All were passed over for promotions that went to men with objectively inferior results. The regional director's voice came through the speaker. Miss Moreno, on behalf of the company, I want to apologize for what appears to be a serious breach of our values. We'll be conducting a full investigation. I nodded, but knew corporate speak when I heard it. Investigations could be buried, findings minimized, problems swept away with NDAs and settlements. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I should mention that I've also prepared a detailed analysis of the financial impact these manipulations had on my compensation over the past 3 quarters. The bonus structures tied to performance metrics I actually achieved but wasn't credited for total approximately $47,000 in lost wages. I paused, letting that sink in. Multiply that by 5 affected women, and you're looking at a pattern of gender-based compensation, discrimination, that would interest several regulatory agencies, and possibly the press. The tension in the room thickened. Vance looked like he might be sick. Deirdre was furiously texting someone under the table. Arthur cleared his throat. Perhaps we should continue this discussion with just Ms. Moreno and the executive team. As Vance and Deirdre were asked to leave, I caught Vance's eye. The man who had systematically undermined my work, who had built his success on diminishing mine, who had probably never imagined I'd fight back. He looked away first. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights and feeling strangely calm. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues who had heard rumors. I answered none of them. This moment was mine, and I wanted to savor the stillness before the storm that would follow. Monday morning arrived with a different energy. Security met me in the lobby, but instead of escorting me out, they took me to the executive floor, a place I'd visited exactly twice in 6 years. The CEO, Lorraine Templeton, was waiting in her office. Unlike most of the executive suite, her space was minimal and practical. No mahogany pretensions or walls of vanity awards. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Ms. Moreno, she said, studying me with sharp eyes. I've spent my weekend reviewing your evidence. It's compelling. I sat silently, waiting. I built this company to be different, she continued, to value performance over politics, to reward results regardless of gender or background. She sighed heavily. Clearly, I've failed to ensure those values reached every corner of our organization. With respect, I replied, values without enforcement are just wall decorations. A smile flickered across her face. Precisely why I wanted to meet with you directly. Vance has been terminated. Deirdre has been suspended pending further investigation. Connor Haverford's promotion is under review. She slid a folder across her desk. This is our proposal to make this right. It includes back pay for the bonuses you earned, a promotion to Director of Client Strategy, and a position on our newly formed Compensation Review Committee. I opened the folder and scanned the documents inside. The numbers were significant, far beyond what I'd expected. "Why not just offer me a settlement to go away quietly?" I asked. "It would be cheaper." Lorraine's expression hardened. "Because that's what Vance would do. Cover the problem instead of fixing it. I don't want you gone, Ms. Moreno. I want you empowered to help me find every instance of this behavior in our company and eliminate it." I considered her words carefully. "And the other women affected?" "Similar compensation adjustments are being prepared, and I want you to help me develop a transparent reporting system that prevents this from happening again." It wasn't the outcome I had expected when I walked into that conference room 3 days earlier. I had been prepared for termination, for legal battles, for the exhausting fight that would follow. I hadn't prepared for victory, at least not one this complete. But as I looked at the offer before me, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something much bigger. "I have some ideas about that reporting system," I said, pulling out my notebook, "and about how we identify other potential cases throughout the company." Lorraine smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I was hoping you would." The next weeks were intense. I moved offices, assembled a team, and began the painstaking work of auditing performance records across the company. We found 7 more cases similar to mine, all women, all with adjusted performance metrics, all denied promotions or compensation they had earned. Connor Haverford resigned before his review was completed. Rumor had it he'd already accepted a position at a competitor. I wondered if he'd taken his manipulative practices with him, or if being exposed had taught him something. I found I didn't much care either way. The system we built was elegant in its simplicity. Performance metrics would now be recorded in a blockchain-style database that tracked every change, who made it, when, and why. Employees would receive automatic notifications of any adjustments to their records. Quarterly audits would scan for patterns of alteration targeting specific groups. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the implementation plan, Tanya from Healthcare Accounts stopped by my new office. "I never thought anyone would believe us," she said quietly. "I almost gave up and left last year when my numbers kept coming in low despite everything I was doing." "I know the feeling," I replied. "For months, I thought I was going crazy, questioning my own work, my own memory." "How did you find the courage to fight back?" she asked. I thought about my mother, who had lost a 20-year teaching career because she couldn't prove her principal had altered her student evaluation scores after she reported his inappropriate behavior toward female staff. "Documentation," I said simply, and the absolute certainty that I wouldn't let someone else take credit for my work or make me doubt myself. Tanya nodded. "Well, thank you. You've changed things for all of us." After she left, I sat looking at my computer screen, at the countless files of evidence I'd gathered, at the new system we were building. The revenge wasn't in destroying careers, though Vance certainly deserved his fate. The revenge was in creating something that would prevent this from happening to others. That's the thing about real justice. It's not just about punishing wrongdoers. It's about fixing the broken systems that enabled them. 6 months later, I stood at a podium at our company's annual leadership conference, presenting the new performance tracking system to managers from across the country. As I explained how it would ensure accountability and fairness, I spotted Lorraine in the back of the room, nodding approvingly. When I finished, she joined me on stage. "What Eliza has built isn't just a reporting system," she told the audience. "It's a blueprint for integrity. And it came from someone who had every reason to walk away from this company, but chose instead to make it better." The applause was thunderous, but the real victory was in the data that followed. Promotions of qualified women increased 34% in the first year. Pay equity gaps narrowed across every department. Employee retention improved dramatically. And me? I found that success truly is the best revenge. Not just professional success, but the deep satisfaction of knowing that my battle had created lasting change. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't kept those records, if I hadn't noticed the pattern, if I had just signed those termination papers and walked away that day. I never expected my story to become a case study in corporate ethics training. I never imagined standing in front of executives at industry conferences, explaining how systematic bias can hide in performance metrics. I certainly never thought I'd be featured in business magazines as some kind of corporate whistleblower hero. But life has a way of taking unexpected turns when you stand your ground. It's been 16 months since that day in the conference room, and I want to share what happened after, because the revenge wasn't just that single moment of exposure, it was everything that followed. About 2 months after implementing our new transparent reporting system, I received an email that made my heart stop. It was from someone named Danielle Mercer at a competing firm. The subject line, "Vance Holloway is interviewing here. I saw your presentation at the Financial Services Summit last month," she wrote. "Our company is considering Vance Holloway for a senior position. He has impressive references, but something felt off in his interview. I Googled him and found nothing concerning. But then a colleague mentioned rumors about his departure from your firm. I'm taking a risk contacting you, but I need to know, should I be worried?" I stared at my screen for a long time. Vance had been quietly terminated with a separation agreement that included non-disparagement clauses. The company had chosen not to pursue further action against him, focusing instead on fixing our internal systems. I was bound by the same confidentiality provisions as everyone else. What would justice look like in this moment? Revenge would be easy. I could forward all my evidence to Danielle and watch Vance's career opportunities crumble. It would feel good, knowing he couldn't just slide into another position where he might repeat his behavior. Instead, I called our legal department. "I need guidance," I told Arthur Westman. "I've been contacted by someone at a competing firm about Vance. What are my obligations here?" Arthur was silent for a moment. "Legally, the non-disparagement clause limits what you can say, but there's a moral question that goes beyond legal obligations," he said carefully. "If we know someone has a pattern of harmful behavior and we say nothing, are we complicit in future harm?" That conversation led to an emergency meeting with Lorraine and the executive team. After 3 hours of debate about legal exposure versus ethical responsibility, we drafted a carefully worded response that Lorraine would deliver personally by phone, not in writing. I never learned exactly what she said to Danielle's CEO, but I did receive another email from Danielle 2 weeks later. "Thank you. We've gone in another direction with that position. Your company's handling of this situation was both ethical and professional." That night, I sat on my balcony again, thinking about circles of accountability, about how systems protect people like Vance until someone disrupts them, about how revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about prevention. The next challenge came from an unexpected direction: my colleagues. While many supported me, others grew resentful of the changes. The new transparency system meant everyone's performance was visible. No more hiding mediocre results behind office politics or personal connections. No more taking credit for others' work. Noah from the trading desk cornered me in the break room one morning. "Your little justice crusade has turned this place into a surveillance state," he said, his voice low but intense. "Some of us were doing just fine before you decided to play corporate watchdog." I measured my response carefully. "Transparency isn't surveillance, Noah. It's accountability." "Easy for you to say when you're the one who designed the system," he replied. "Word is you're just currying favor with Lorraine to fast-track your own career." I felt heat rise to my face but kept my expression neutral. The system treats everyone equally. If you're doing your job well, you have nothing to worry about. He leaned closer. "You've made enemies, Eliza. More than you know." As he walked away, I realized revenge has consequences beyond its intended target. By exposing Vance and changing our systems, I disrupted a power structure that benefited more people than just him. People who were now watching me closely, waiting for me to fail. And fail I did, spectacularly. 3 months later, we were pitching to secure the Jenkins account, a potential client worth millions in annual revenue. I'd worked nights and weekends preparing our presentation, analyzing their portfolio needs, customizing our service offerings. This was my first major pitch since my promotion, and everyone was watching. The morning of the presentation, I woke to find my carefully prepared slides had been altered overnight. Key data points were wrong. Financial projections were miscalculated. Client-specific references had been replaced with generic language. Someone had accessed my presentation after hours and sabotaged it. My first instinct was panic. The Jenkins team would be in our office in 2 hours. There wasn't time to reconstruct everything from scratch. Then I remembered. Our new system tracked everything, including document revisions. I called our IT security team, who confirmed my suspicions. My presentation had been accessed at 11:42 p.m. using Noah's credentials. Every change was logged in the system, every deletion, every alteration, every replacement. When Noah strolled into the office at 8:30, he found me waiting with Arthur from legal and Rita from IT security. "Interesting evening work you did last night," I said calmly. The color drained from his face as Rita outlined the evidence. Arthur explained the severity of the violation, not just company policy, but potentially laws regarding corporate sabotage and interference with business relationships. "You have 30 minutes to clean out your desk," Arthur told him. "Security will escort you out." As Noah stood to leave, his shock transformed into something uglier. "This isn't over, Eliza. People like you don't last in this industry. You think you've won, but you've just painted a target on your back." After he left, I had exactly 90 minutes to salvage my presentation. With help from my team, we restored the correct data from backups and rebuilt what we couldn't recover. The pitch went forward, not perfectly, but well enough that the Jenkins team signed with us the following week. That evening, Lorraine called me into her office. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," she said without preamble. "Noah wasn't acting alone. He has friends in executive positions at 3 competitor firms. They've been reaching out to our clients, spreading rumors about instability in our leadership." My stomach tightened. I never wanted to create problems for the company. "You didn't create the problems, Eliza. You exposed them." Lorraine tapped her pen against her desk. "But now we need to decide how to respond." What followed was the most challenging 6 months of my career. The revenge I'd sought against one man had evolved into something much larger, a fundamental restructuring of power dynamics that had been in place for decades. Several clients did leave, citing concerns about recent changes in management. 2 board members who had been close with Vance resigned in protest over what they called excessive transparency measures. Our stock price dipped temporarily as market analysts questioned our internal stability. I began to doubt myself. Had my pursuit of justice gone too far? Had my desire for revenge against Vance inadvertently damaged the livelihoods of hundreds of innocent employees? One evening, as I was working late, Imani from estate planning knocked on my door. She had been one of the women whose performance metrics had been altered under Vance's management. "I heard you're taking heat for the client losses," she said. I nodded, too tired to pretend everything was fine. "I wanted you to see this." She handed me a folder. Inside was a report showing that while we had lost 7 clients in the corporate exodus, her division had gained 12 new ones in the same period. And it's not just estate planning. Tanya's healthcare accounts are up 22%. Zoe's retirement services division landed the Riverside Pension Fund last week. I looked up, confused. Why the sudden growth? Imani smiled. "Word is spreading about our new approach. Clients, especially women clients with significant portfolios, are moving their business to us specifically because of our commitment to transparency and ethics. The Jenkins account? The deciding factor was your presentation about our new reporting systems." She sat across from me. "The old guard is fighting back because they're scared. They should be. You've changed the game, Eliza, and some of us are winning because of it." That conversation shifted something in me. I stopped seeing myself as someone who had disrupted the company and started recognizing that I was helping rebuild it. Stronger, fairer, more sustainable. The next quarter's results proved Imani right. While we had lost some traditional corporate clients, we had gained significant new business in areas where we had previously struggled to compete. Our client diversity improved dramatically. Employee retention among women and minority staff reached record highs. And then came the day I'd been both anticipating and dreading. 9 months after his termination, Vance Holloway filed a wrongful dismissal lawsuit against the company and against me personally. His legal claim alleged that I had manufactured evidence to orchestrate his dismissal, and engaged in a vindictive campaign to destroy his professional reputation. He was seeking $3.8 million in damages. When I read the lawsuit, something unexpected happened. Instead of fear or anger, I felt a strange sense of calm. This was Vance's last desperate attempt to rewrite history, to position himself as the victim rather than the perpetrator. Our legal team was confident. His case has no merit, Arthur assured me. Our documentation is impeccable. The system logs can't be altered retroactively. Multiple witnesses have corroborated your account. But lawsuits are draining, even when you're in the right. For the next 3 months, I sat through depositions where Vance's attorneys questioned my motives, my methods, my mental state. They painted me as an ambitious employee who had fabricated evidence to advance my career at Vance's expense. During a particularly grueling session, Vance himself was present. As his lawyer pressed me about why I had begun documenting my work so meticulously, I looked directly at Vance. I learned it from my mother, I said. She was a public school teacher for 20 years. When she reported her principal for inappropriate behavior toward female staff, he altered her performance evaluations to justify firing her. She had no proof of what he'd done, so she lost everything: her job, her pension, her professional reputation. I kept my eyes on Vance. She taught me that when systems are designed to protect the powerful, documentation becomes a form of resistance. I didn't start keeping records because I suspected Vance specifically. I kept records because I understood how vulnerable employees can be when those with authority abuse it. The deposition room fell silent. Even Vance's attorney seemed momentarily at a loss for words. 2 weeks later, Vance withdrew his lawsuit. The terms of the withdrawal were confidential, but he never worked in our industry again. The final chapter of this story came a year after that conference room confrontation. Lorraine invited me to join the board of directors as head of a new ethics and accountability committee. My role would be to ensure that the changes we'd implemented became permanent parts of the company's structure, embedded in its DNA, not dependent on any individual champion. At my first board meeting, I proposed something radical: publishing our internal accountability metrics externally, sharing with clients, investors, and regulators exactly how we measured performance, how we ensured fairness in promotion and compensation, how we addressed discrepancies when they appeared. Transparency shouldn't stop at our walls, I argued. If we truly believe in what we've built, we should be willing to let the world see it. The debate was intense. Some board members worried about competitive disadvantage, others about increased regulatory scrutiny. But in the end, the vote was 7-2 in favor of my proposal. 6 months later, our company became the first in the industry to publish a comprehensive accountability and ethics report alongside our financial statements. The response was overwhelming. Industry publications covered it extensively. Regulatory bodies cited it as a model. And most importantly, clients responded with increased trust and investment. 3 other major firms in our sector have since adopted similar transparency measures. It's becoming a competitive advantage, proof that doing the right thing can also be good business. Last week, I received an email from a woman named Jordan at a technology company across the country. I found your ethics report online while researching how to address similar issues in my workplace. She wrote, "Would you be willing to share how you gathered evidence and built your case? I believe the same thing is happening to me and 3 other women in my department." I spent an hour on the phone with her that evening, explaining how to document discrepancies, how to secure evidence, how to build an irrefutable case. As we talked, I realized that the ripples from my small act of resistance were spreading far beyond what I could have imagined. That's the thing about standing up to systemic problems. You never know how far the impact will reach. My revenge against Vance wasn't just about him, or even about me. It became about changing the environment that allowed people like him to thrive at the expense of others. So, if you're sitting there wondering if you should fight back against unfairness in your workplace, if you should stand up when you see someone being undermined or diminished, if you should risk your comfort to expose a broken system, my answer is yes. Document everything. Build your case meticulously. And when the moment comes, be ready to show your receipts. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying your enemies, It's transforming the world that empowered them. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is worth it. Leave a comment about your own experiences. I read every single one, and your stories help me remember why this fight matters. And subscribe for more real conversations about navigating professional life with integrity and courage. Because these battles aren't fought alone, and your voice matters in this conversation too. Thank you for listening to my story. The revenge wasn't in the confrontation. It was in everything that came after. It was in building something better from the ashes of what was broken. I don't care if your mother died yesterday. This presentation needs to be perfect. The words hit me as I stood in his office, still dressed in the black dress I'd worn to the funeral that morning. The fabric felt too tight now, like it might suffocate me. Rain tapped against the glass wall behind Dominic, my CEO, as he continued without looking up from his computer. Put your emotions behind you and focus on the project. The investors are coming in 3 weeks, and we can't afford any mistakes. Their capital injection will push us international. 5 years of work comes down to this moment. I blinked, struggling to process his words through the fog of grief that had enveloped me since Mom took her last breath. Dominic, I just buried. Everyone loses people, Iris. He finally looked up, his gaze sharp as a scalpel. My grandfather died during our first major launch. Did I take time off? No. I worked harder. That's how I built this company from nothing. His words scraped against my raw emotions. 5 years I'd devoted to building his boutique fragrance company from a workshop in a converted garage to a brand on the cusp of international recognition. 5 years perfecting the scent architecture system my mother had taught me. The very system that transformed his mediocre products into experiences that made people close their eyes and breathe deeper. The funeral was today, I whispered, my voice barely audible. And tomorrow is another workday. Professional obligations don't pause for personal circumstances. Dominic stood, straightening his tie. You're my head of product development. Act like it. My fingers closed around the small glass vial in my pocket, the last scent my mother had created before cancer claimed her. She'd pressed it into my palm 2 days before she died, whispering that it contained everything she'd learned about creating emotional connections through scent. You're right, I said, something shifting inside me like tectonic plates before an earthquake. I'll focus solely on the work. That night, after everyone left, I stayed. The office fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the soft tap of my keyboard. One by one, I accessed our scent architecture database, the heart of our company's success. With methodical precision, I began altering the formulations for our upcoming collection. I removed the emotional architecture components that made our scents distinctive, the precise balance of notes that triggered specific emotional responses. I left the fragrances technically correct, but stripped them of their soul. Without the emotional framework I'd built, they became ordinary scents, pleasant but forgettable. Nothing like the transformative experiences we were known for creating. When I finished, I drafted my resignation letter, printed it, and placed it on Dominic's desk. The next morning, his voice echoed through the office before I'd even taken my coat off. Iris, my office, now. I walked in, my back straight, face composed. The resignation letter was clutched in his hand. You can't leave now, he said, eyes wide with panic. The investor presentation? I'm putting my emotions aside to focus on what matters, I replied, using his exact words. My notice is effective immediately. Is this because of what I said yesterday? Look, I was stressed, and no explanations needed. I understand perfectly. Goodbye, Dominic. I turned and walked out, ignoring the stunned faces of my colleagues as I collected my personal items and left the building for the last time. Or so I thought. What I didn't expect was how quickly everything would unravel, or that Dominic would soon be at my door, desperately pleading for my return. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're enjoying this story of workplace betrayal and calculated revenge, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories that explore the complex emotions we navigate in professional settings. Drop a comment about a time someone told you to set your emotions aside at work. I read every single one. Now, let me properly introduce myself. My name is Iris Laurent. At 32, I'd become the driving creative force behind Sensorial, the company Dominic founded, but that I had transformed. I'd always been different, even as a child. While other kids played with toys, I collected scents. Mom called me her little bloodhound because I could identify what she was cooking from 3 rooms away just from the aroma. My mother, Elena, was a master perfumer who never achieved recognition in the mainstream fragrance industry. Her approach was too unconventional, too intimate. While traditional perfumers focused on pleasing scent combinations, Mom understood that fragrance was about emotional architecture, in building scents that triggered specific emotional responses. A true perfume doesn't just smell good, she always said. It creates a bridge between memory and emotion. When I was 27, fresh from getting my chemistry degree, and working at a laboratory that tested commercial fragrances, Mom encouraged me to meet with Dominic. He had started a small fragrance company with ambitious goals but mediocre products. She thought my scientific background combined with her emotional architecture theory could transform his business. She was right. Within a year of joining, I had developed our signature methodology, a precise system for creating scents that evoked specific emotional experiences. Our first collection using this approach sold out in weeks. Within 3 years, we had expanded from one small workspace to an office, with 20 employees and distribution in luxury boutiques across the country. Dominic loved to tell the story of our success, positioning himself as the visionary who revolutionized fragrance development. He never mentioned that the revolutionary approach came from what my mother had taught me, refined through my chemistry knowledge. In interviews, he spoke of our unique process, while I stood silently beside him, the unnamed architect of that very process. I accepted this arrangement because I loved the work itself, creating scents that moved people, that transported them, that made them close their eyes and smile. That was worth more than recognition. Mom always told me that true artistry didn't need applause to validate it. Then Mom got sick. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, the doctors said. She lasted 4. During those 4 months, I split my time between her bedside and the lab, creating our most ambitious collection yet for the investor presentation. Dominic grudgingly allowed me to work flexible hours, though his disapproval was obvious in the tight smiles and curt emails asking for updates. 2 days before she died, Mom gave me the vial, her final creation. "This is everything I know," she whispered, her once strong hands now thin and trembling. "About scent, about emotion, about life. It's all in there, Iris." I opened it later that night, alone in my apartment. The scent was unlike anything I'd experienced, complex layers that shifted and evolved, revealing new dimensions with each breath. It made me cry, then laugh, then feel a profound sense of peace. It was her masterpiece. The morning after the funeral, I brought the vial to work, planning to analyze its composition. That's when Dominic called me into his office and told me to put my emotions aside. The first week after I resigned passed quietly. I spent days in my apartment, alternating between grief for my mother and a strange, hollow feeling about leaving the work that had defined me for years. I avoided calls from my former colleagues. I changed my email password and notification settings. I needed space. On day 8, my phone rang with Dominic's number. I let it go to voicemail. "Iris, we need to talk. There's an issue with the new collection. The test group feedback is concerning. Call me back." I didn't. 3 more calls came that day, then 5 the next. I blocked his number. Then came the emails. "The development team can't figure out what's wrong. Everything checks out technically, but something's missing." Then, "Our biggest retail partner says the samples feel generic. What did you change before you left?" And finally, "Please, Iris, whatever you did, we need to fix it. The investor presentation is in 10 days. I deleted them all. On day 14, my former assistant Riley appeared at my door. I almost didn't recognize her. Her typically perfect appearance was disheveled, dark circles under her eyes. "Everyone's panicking," she said when I invited her in. "The new collection is failing all the feedback sessions. 3 potential retail partners expressed disappointment after sampling. The team has checked everything, ingredient quality, measurements, maturation processes, but they can't find what's wrong." I poured her tea, saying nothing. "Dominic is losing it," she continued. "He's shouting at everyone. Yesterday he threw a bottle against the wall when our biggest distributor suggested postponing the launch. I stirred honey into my tea. Sounds stressful." Riley leaned forward. "What did you do, Iris?" I put my emotions aside, just like Dominic instructed. I sipped my tea. I removed them from the system. Her eyes widened with understanding. "The emotional architecture. You took it out of the formulations." I nodded. "But why not just tell them how to fix it?" I set my cup down. "Because some lessons can't be taught, Riley. They must be experienced." After Riley left, I turned off my phone and spent the afternoon in my mother's garden. The roses she'd planted years ago were blooming, their scent carrying memories of Sunday mornings when she'd taught me to identify every note in a perfume. I closed my eyes, the sun warm on my face, and uncorked Mom's vial again. As the complex aroma surrounded me, I felt her presence, not in some mystical way, but in the meticulous craft of the scent, in the balance of notes that only she could have achieved. And in that moment, breathing in her final creation, I knew exactly what I would demand when Dominic eventually came begging. Because he would come, that was certain now. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Kayla, our marketing director, shifting nervously from foot to foot. "You look terrible," I said, opening the door. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Our largest distributor is threatening to cancel their entire order. The investor presentation has been postponed. 3 board members called for an emergency meeting yesterday." I leaned against the doorframe. "Sounds like a Tuesday at Sensorial." "This isn't funny, Iris." Her voice cracked. "Everything is falling apart. The development team is working around the clock trying to recreate your formulations." "And how's that going?" "They can't do it." She pushed a hand through her hair. "They understand the chemistry, but something's missing. The testers keep saying the same thing. The scents are fine but forgettable. They don't evoke anything. Because they aren't designed to anymore." Kayla's professional composure crumbled. "Please, just tell me what you changed." I removed what Dominic deemed unnecessary emotion. I crossed my arms. He wanted me to set my feelings aside, so I set them aside from the formulations too. "He shouldn't have said what he did after your mother died. Everyone knows that." Yet no one said anything. Her eyes dropped. "We were afraid. And now? Now we're desperate." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Give Dominic a message. What I removed can't be replicated from notes or memory. It's a system, not a formula. After she left, I turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls, 16 voicemails, 43 emails. The digital desperation of a company in free fall. I spent the afternoon in my mother's studio, a small room in my apartment that still held her perfume organ, the workspace where she'd taught me to build sense note by note. Her notebooks filled the shelves, handwritten pages documenting decades of discovery. I opened one from 15 years ago, finding a passage about balance. "A truly transformative scent," she'd written, "requires mathematical precision but lives in emotional truth. Without the latter, you have merely arranged molecules in a pleasing order. With it, you have created memory, anticipation, and connection." Dominic never understood this. To him, our success came from clever marketing and premium packaging. He saw the emotional architecture system as a selling point, not the foundational element that distinguished us from competitors. When he interviewed me 5 years ago, he'd seemed so different, passionate about building something meaningful, eager to integrate my mother's theories into his developing brand. I was young, ambitious, and grieving my recent divorce. The opportunity to apply my chemistry background to my mother's emotional architecture theories felt like destiny. For the first 2 years, we were aligned. Dominic handled business. I created the products. Our first collection using my system, Truth Memory, sold out 3 production runs. When industry publications requested interviews, Dominic would say, "Iris is the real genius here," though he'd quickly pivot to discussing his business vision. Everything changed when big money entered the picture. An industry giant attempted to poach me with triple my salary. Instead of countering the offer, Dominic registered patents for our scent development methodology, listing himself as primary inventor and me as a contributing developer. When I confronted him, his response was baffling in its audacity. "I founded this company. Your contribution is valuable, but ultimately, Sensorial's success comes from my business strategy." I stayed despite this betrayal because I loved the work itself. Creating scents that moved people, that transported them, felt like my life's purpose, and I had nowhere else to go that would allow me the creative freedom I had, patents or not. So I buried my resentment alongside my creative recognition, channeling everything into perfecting the emotional architecture system. Each successful collection further entrenched the process that Dominic now legally owned but couldn't possibly replicate. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. An unknown number. "Hello? Iris." Thank God. It was Brendan, our finance director. "Listen, I'm calling from a personal phone so Dominic doesn't know. The investors are wavering. Word got out that you left, and they're questioning the company's ability to maintain quality." That sounds like a Dominic problem. It's an everyone problem. Without this capital injection, we can't expand production. Without expanded production, we can't fulfill the international orders we've already promised. Without those orders, the company collapses. I finished. Exactly. He paused. Look, I know what Dominic said to you was unforgivable, but 30 people might lose their jobs over this. People with families. The weight of his words settled on me. My revenge against Dominic might hurt innocent people. People like Riley, who had supported me through my mother's illness, covering my work without complaint. I need to think, I said finally. There's not much time. The rescheduled investor presentation is in 5 days. After hanging up, I paced my apartment, conflicted. My revenge was working perfectly. Dominic was panicking. The company was faltering, but the collateral damage troubled me. Mom would have said that true artistry should elevate others, not destroy them. I uncorked her vial again, letting the complex scent fill the room. As I breathed it in, I recognized something I'd missed before, a note of courage beneath the complexity. Mom's final message to me wasn't just about perfume. It was about standing in my power. My doorbell rang at 9:47 that evening. Through the peephole, I saw Dominic himself, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his confident posture replaced with something closer to defeat. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. 3 weeks, I said. That's how long it took for you to show up yourself. Can I come in? No, he sighed, looking suddenly older. I deserve that. You deserve worse. I know. He ran a hand through his hair. Everything we built is falling apart, Iris. We need you back. What exactly do you need? The head of product development who should set aside her emotions? Or the emotional architecture that makes our products unique? Understanding dawned slowly on his face. You removed it from the formulations. I put my emotions aside just as you instructed. He stepped back, the full implications hitting him. The architecture can't be recreated from the documentation? The documentation shows measurements and ingredients. The emotional architecture lives in application and intuition. In the space between notes, in the balance that creates connection. I leaned against the doorframe. In all the things you dismissed as irrelevant. I never said, when you told me to put my emotions aside, you weren't just being cruel about my mother's death. You were revealing how little you understand about what makes our products special. He was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? 3 conditions. First, a sensory therapy foundation in my mother's name. Second, a compassionate leave policy for all employees. Third, I return as Chief Creative Officer with complete autonomy over fragrance development. His jaw tightened. The board would never, then watch everything we built evaporate, I replied, beginning to close the door. Wait, he called. I'll make it happen. I want it in writing, and I want joint ownership of the patents. That's not one of your 3 conditions. I just added a 4th. He looked like he might argue, then deflated. I'll have legal draw up the papers tomorrow. You have until noon. After that, I permanently delete all my private notes on the emotional architecture system. After he left, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, uncertain if I'd won or lost. Revenge had been satisfying, but hollow. What I really wanted wasn't just to punish Dominic, it was to honor my mother's legacy and protect the work I believed in. I pulled out her vial again, breathing in the complex notes. In that moment, I made my decision. The next morning, I received the documents by courier. Joint patent ownership, the establishment of the Elena Laurent Sensory Therapy Foundation, a comprehensive, compassionate leave policy, and my promotion to Chief Creative Officer with creative autonomy guaranteed by contract. I signed where indicated and returned the papers with the courier. Then, I prepared to return to the company I'd nearly destroyed. Walking into the office the following day felt surreal. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as I passed. Some colleagues avoided eye contact. Others offered cautious smiles. The energy was tense, like the air before a thunderstorm. Riley met me at my old office door, now bearing a new nameplate, Iris Laurent, Chief Creative Officer. Everyone's terrified, she whispered. Dominic called an all-hands meeting in 20 minutes. No one knows what's happening. I do, I said, setting down my bag. We're saving the company. Can you? There's only 4 days until the investor presentation. 4 days is plenty of time. I spent the first hour reviewing what had been done in my absence. The development team had attempted to recreate my formulations using the technical documentation, but without understanding the emotional architecture behind them, they'd created technically correct but soulless products. The meeting with Dominic was brief and uncomfortable. He introduced me as the new CCO, announced the compassionate leave policy, and mentioned the foundation in my mother's name. His words were correct, but his eyes revealed his humiliation. Iris will be leading the revised product development for the investor presentation, he concluded, not quite meeting my gaze. She has full authority on all creative decisions. After the meeting, I gathered the development team in the lab. For the first time, I explained what emotional architecture actually meant, not just as a marketing concept, but as a precise methodology. Scent is the only sense that bypasses rational thought and connects directly to the emotional brain, I explained, uncapping sample vials. When we construct a fragrance, we're not just arranging pleasant smells, we're creating a bridge between memory and anticipation. I demonstrated how specific combinations of notes could trigger emotional responses, how certain aldehydes created nostalgia, how particular wood notes grounded anxiety, how precise balances of florals opened the heart. This isn't mystical, I continued. It's neurochemical, but the application requires both precision and intuition. For the next 3 days, we worked nonstop rebuilding the collection. I restored the emotional architecture to each formulation, teaching the team as we worked. By the third evening, we had recreated 7 key scents for the presentation. On the 4th morning, I arrived early to find Dominic waiting in my office. For a moment, I thought he might have changed his mind about our agreement. "The samples you sent over last night," he said quietly. "They're extraordinary. They're what they always were," I corrected, before I removed the emotional architecture. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "The marketing team needs the experience descriptions for the presentation materials. I'll have them by noon." He turned to leave, then paused. "Your mother would be proud of what you've built here." The comment caught me off guard, sincere in a way Dominic rarely was. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. The day of the investor presentation arrived with nervous energy rippling through the office. Everything depended on convincing these investors that our products were truly revolutionary, worthy of the capital injection that would take us international. As I prepared the scent samples in the conference room, arranging them precisely for maximum impact, I felt strangely calm. Whatever happened today, I had reclaimed my power and honored my mother's legacy. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as 7 potential investors, representatives from luxury conglomerates and private equity firms, took their seats around the table. Dominic stood at the head, delivering his practiced introduction about Sensorial's journey from boutique startup to emerging luxury brand. I watched from my position near the product display, noting how he carefully phrased his words, no longer claiming sole credit for our methodology, instead using "we," and occasionally glancing in my direction. The humbling had changed him, though whether temporarily or permanently remained to be seen. What separates Sensorial from competitors isn't just quality ingredients or attractive packaging, Dominic explained. It's our proprietary emotional architecture system developed by our Chief Creative Officer, Iris Laurent. He gestured toward me, yielding the floor. This was new. Before my departure, I'd always been introduced as a technical specialist who would demonstrate the products, never as the creator of our methodology. As I moved to the center of the room, I felt a strange calm. The vial my mother had given me was in my pocket, its weight reassuring against my thigh. "Fragrance is unique among luxury products," I began. "Unlike a handbag or jewelry, which you appreciate visually before purchasing, scent must be experienced to be understood. And unlike those items, fragrance works directly on the brain's emotional centers." I distributed the first sample cards, each treated with one of our signature scents. "What you're about to experience isn't just a pleasant aroma. It's an emotional journey crafted with mathematical precision." One by one, the investors closed their eyes as they breathed in the scents. I watched their faces transform, tension releasing from furrowed brows, lips softening into slight smiles, shoulders dropping as the carefully constructed notes triggered neurological responses. Our first collection focused on emotional balance. I continued, moving to the next sample. This upcoming collection explores emotional clarity, the moments when we see ourselves and our lives with perfect understanding. As the presentation progressed, I noticed something unexpected. Dominic, who normally maintained tight control over investor meetings, had stepped back against the wall. He was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between admiration and revelation. The investors were responding exactly as planned. When I presented the market projections for the new collection, showing how our previous releases had outperformed competitors by substantial margins, their polite interest transformed into eager engagement. "These emotional responses you're describing, said Amara, representing the largest luxury conglomerate. They're remarkably specific. How do you engineer that level of precision? This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the question that would allow me to reveal the final piece of my plan. That's an excellent question, I said. And the answer involves something we haven't shared publicly until today. I reached into my pocket and removed my mother's vial. Holding it up so light caught the amber liquid inside. This contains my mother's final creation, the culmination of her life's work in sensory emotion. After her recent passing, I integrated her discoveries with our existing methodology to create what we're calling emotional precision mapping. Dominic straightened against the wall, his eyes widening slightly. This wasn't part of the planned presentation. Using this advanced approach, I continued, we can create scents that target not just general emotional states, but specific emotional experiences. Not just calming, but the calm clarity after making a difficult decision. Not just uplifting, but the rising joy of recognition for work well done. I uncapped the vial and placed a single drop on 7 new sample cards, passing them to the investors. This is just a prototype, but it demonstrates the potential of where we're heading. As they experienced the scent, the transformation was immediate and profound. Amara actually gasped. Another investor's eyes filled with tears. A third looked up with an expression of wonder I'd only seen in children. What? What was that? Asked Amara, her composed business demeanor momentarily stripped away. That was emotional precision, I answered. A scent designed to evoke the specific feeling of coming home to yourself after being lost. The room fell silent. Even Dominic appeared stunned. Miss Laurent, said one of the investors, clearing his throat, am I correct in understanding that you personally hold this methodology? The foundational emotional architecture system is jointly patented between myself and Sensorial, I clarified, watching Dominic from the corner of my eye. This advanced application, emotional precision mapping, is still in development, built on my mother's final work. And it would be exclusive to Sensorial? Asked another investor. Under the right conditions, yes. The energy in the room shifted. What had been a standard investment opportunity had transformed into something the luxury industry rarely encountered. Genuine innovation with profound market potential. I think we should discuss terms, said Amara, looking at her colleagues, who nodded in agreement. Dominic stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the meeting. We've prepared projection models for various investment levels. Actually, Amara interrupted, I'd like to hear from Miss Laurent about what conditions would ensure her commitment to developing this methodology exclusively for Sensorial. And there it was, the moment my revenge truly crystallized. Not in Dominic's panic when the products failed, not in the concessions I'd already secured, but in this moment, when the power dynamic permanently shifted. 3 essential conditions, I said, meeting Amara's gaze. First, continued development of the Elena Laurent Sensory Therapy Foundation, with 5% of all future profits directed there. Second, ethical business practices including the compassionate leave policy we've recently implemented. And third, creative autonomy protected by contract. Dominic remained silent, understanding exactly what was happening. The investment wasn't contingent on him anymore. It was contingent on me. Those terms seem reasonable, Amara replied, though I suspect there are details to be negotiated. Of course, I smiled. That's why we have Dominic. His business acumen is unmatched. The slight acknowledgement was both olive branch and reminder. I recognized his skills, while establishing that my creative vision was now the company's most valuable asset. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises of detailed term sheets to follow. As the investors filed out, their excitement palpable, Dominic approached me. Emotional precision mapping? He asked quietly. When were you going to tell me about this? I just did. You blindsided me in front of potential investors. Yes, similar to how you blindsided me with patent registrations listing yourself as primary inventor of my methodology. His jaw tightened. That was business. So was this. We stood in silence. The conference room empty now, except for us. Will you really develop this new methodology for Sensorial? He finally asked. Yes, I answered honestly, but not for you, for the company. For the employees who deserve job security, for my mother's legacy. And what about us? He asked, surprising me with the personal question. There is no us, Dominic. There's a business relationship with clearly defined parameters. He nodded slowly. I deserve that. Yes, you do. As I gathered my materials, he remained standing there, seemingly at a loss. a man who had built his identity around being in control, now facing a future where that control was compromised. "For what it's worth," he said as I reached the door, "I am sorry about your mother." And how I responded. I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Thank you for saying that." 3 months later, the investment deal closed. The capital injection was 30% higher than our original target, with specific provisions, ensuring my continued role and creative control. The Elena Lorentz Sensory Therapy Foundation launched with its first research grants for studying how scent therapy could help trauma survivors. I moved into a new office, not Dominic's corner space, but a laboratory studio hybrid I designed myself, with north-facing windows and space for my mother's perfume organ, which I brought from home. The compassionate leave policy was tested when Riley's father had a stroke, and she took 3 weeks to help with his recovery. Upon her return, she was promoted to Assistant Creative Director, the first of several organizational changes that redistributed power throughout the company. Dominic remained CEO, but our working relationship transformed. The board, influenced by our new investors, created checks and balances that prevented either of us from making unilateral decisions. He handled business operations. I directed creative development. We communicated through structured meetings rather than casual interactions. Sometimes I caught him watching me during product presentations, that same expression of revelation on his face, as though continually realizing something that had been in front of him all along. One evening, working late in my studio office, I opened my mother's vial again. After months of careful analysis, I'd finally decoded every component of her final creation. It wasn't just a perfume. It was a methodology embedded in scent form, her lifetime of knowledge distilled into something that could be experienced rather than explained. I'd told the truth at the investor meeting. I was developing emotional precision mapping, using her work as foundation. What I hadn't mentioned was that each precision-mapped scent contained a trace element that couldn't be analyzed or replicated, a creative signature that ensured the company would always need me, just as I had needed my job when Dominic registered those patents. Was it petty? Perhaps. But it was also protection against future betrayal. As I closed the vial, my phone chimed with a message from Amara. The first international shipments had arrived in Asia, and customer response was overwhelming. Attached was a video of people experiencing our products for the first time, their expressions transforming as the emotional architecture did its work. I smiled, remembering my mother's words. A true perfume doesn't just smell good. It creates a bridge between memory and emotion. In the end, my revenge wasn't destroying Dominic or the company. It was transforming both, alchemizing pain into power, betrayal into boundary, loss into legacy. I had removed emotion from the system, then returned it on my own terms. The result wasn't just professional recognition or creative control, but something more profound, the understanding that emotions aren't weaknesses to set aside, but foundations to build upon. If you've ever been told to put your emotions aside in a professional setting, remember this: your emotional intelligence might be the very thing that makes your work irreplaceable. Share your experiences in the comments. I'd love to know how you've navigated these challenging workplace dynamics. And if this story resonated with you, subscribe for more explorations of how our emotional lives intersect with our professional ones. Because ultimately, it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power and building something that truly matters. I clutched my coffee mug so tightly, I thought it might shatter as Heath stabbed his finger at the projection screen. My quarterly numbers glowed in angry red, displayed for the entire executive leadership team to see. Look at this decline in new acquisitions, down 17%. Client retention, plummeting. Response times, abysmal. Profit margins in the Western Territory have never been lower, Heath said, his voice dripping with rehearsed disappointment. I've been tracking these metrics personally for months. 14 pairs of eyes shifted uncomfortably between Heath and me. I wanted to disappear through the floor of the glass-walled conference room. 3 years of sacrifice, missed dinners, canceled plans, early mornings and late nights, reduced to a handful of carefully selected statistics that made me look utterly incompetent. If we continue with Nyla's strategy, Heath continued, straightening his already perfect tie, we're looking at a projected $8 million in losses by year's end. I've prepared a transition plan to restructure the Western Division. Translation: he wanted me gone. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came. Heath had blindsided me. This presentation wasn't on the meeting agenda. I'd walked in expecting a standard quarterly review, not my own professional execution. That's quite enough, Heath, The room fell silent as Gerald rose from his chair at the head of the table. At 72, the company founder still commanded attention without raising his voice. "Your analysis seems remarkably one-sided," Gerald said, his weathered hands adjusting his glasses. "Nyla's approach prioritizes long-term growth over quarterly gains. We discussed this when we hired her." Heath's jaw tightened. "With respect, Dad, the board expects results, not excuses. The Eastern Territory consistently outperforms the West under my leadership." "Your territories were established decades ago," Gerald countered. "Nyla inherited a region that had been neglected for years, which is precisely why we needed someone who could deliver immediate results," Heath snapped, dropping the professional veneer. "Instead, we got this." He gestured dismissively at my presence. Gerald's eyes narrowed. "I want to see complete performance metrics, not this cherry-picked nonsense. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., everything. Client acquisition costs, retention rates, lifetime value projections, all of it. You'll see I'm right," Heath replied with chilling confidence. "And if you're not," Gerald challenged, "then I'll gladly admit I was wrong." Heath smiled thinly. "But we both know that's not going to happen." The meeting disbanded, executives filing out in uncomfortable silence. I remained frozen in my chair, heart pounding in my ears, until only Gerald, Heath, and I remained. Gerald placed a hand on my shoulder. "Prepare your complete reports for tomorrow. Everything you've accomplished. Don't leave anything out." After he left, Heath lingered by the doorway. "You should have stayed in your lane, Nyla. We could have avoided all this unpleasantness." When he finally departed, I allowed myself one shuddering breath before the tears came. If you're invested in finding out what happens next in this power struggle between father and son, and what I discover that turns everything upside down, take a quick second to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, what comes next changed not just my career, but my entire life. Let's continue. I'm Nyla Kemp, 34, 5'6" in heels, with a business degree from a state school and a pathological inability to back down from a challenge. Not the most impressive resume for someone tasked with revitalizing an entire business region, but Gerald saw something in me that others missed. 3 years ago, I was managing a small team at a regional competitor when Gerald personally recruited me. The Western Territory was hemorrhaging clients and barely breaking even. The previous regional director had been one of Heath's college friends who treated the position as a stepping stone, leaving chaos in his wake. "We need someone who understands that business is about relationships, not just transactions," Gerald told me during my interview. "Heath disagrees, but I'm still the CEO. I should have recognized the warning signs then. Father and son at odds, with me as the unwitting battlefield." After Heath's ambush, I spent the night in my office, digging through 3 years of reports, emails, and data. My hands trembled as I pieced together what had happened. The truth was far worse than I'd imagined. Resources promised to my region had vanished. Approved hires mysteriously rescinded. Client accounts quietly transferred to the Eastern Division once they became profitable. Someone had systematically sabotaged my efforts while creating a paper trail that made me appear responsible for the failures. By dawn, my eyes burned and my back ached, but I had assembled irrefutable evidence. I wasn't failing, I was being deliberately undermined. By Heath. I arrived at the 8 a.m. meeting to find Gerald already there, surrounded by printouts and looking like he hadn't slept either. "You found it too," he said simply. I nodded, placing my own folder on the table. "How long have you known?" "I suspected something wasn't right for months. But this," he gestured to the papers, "this is beyond anything I imagined." Heath arrived precisely on time, flanked by 2 financial analysts from his team. He faltered momentarily upon seeing Gerald and me already deep in conversation, but quickly recovered his confident smile. "Shall we begin?" Heath said, motioning for his analysts to distribute their reports. "Actually," Gerald interrupted, "I've been reviewing some interesting discrepancies in our resource allocation records." Heath's smile didn't waver. "What sort of discrepancies?" Gerald slid a document across the table. "The budget for the Western Territory's digital infrastructure upgrade. The board approved $2.6 million. Only $1.4 million was ever allocated." "Budget adjustments happen all the time," Heath replied smoothly. "Market conditions change." "Funny thing about those adjustments," I interjected, finding my voice at last. "They were all redirected to projects in the Eastern Territory, projects under your direct control." Heath's analysts exchanged nervous glances. "That's a serious accusation," Heath said, his voice hardening. Gerald continued as if Heath hadn't spoken. "Then there's the matter of the Reynolds account. Western Territory client for 15 years until last June, when they were mysteriously reclassified as Eastern. They opened a new headquarters in Boston, Heath explained. It made sense too. Their headquarters is still in Denver, I cut in. But their account was transferred right after they signed a 3-year renewal contract that I negotiated. A contract worth $4.2 million annually. Heath's facade began to crack. Dad, are you really going to take her word over mine? These are administrative details that show a pattern, Gerald finished. A pattern of systematically undermining the Western Division while using its failures to bolster your own position. He turned to the analysts. You're dismissed. This is now a family matter. After they left, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. How long? Gerald asked quietly. How long have you been sabotaging Nyla's division? Heath abandoned all pretense. Sabotage? I was saving this company from her incompetence. Her entire strategy is outdated. Relationship building? Long-term growth? While our competitors are aggressively expanding market share, she's hosting client appreciation lunches. Those outdated methods increased client retention by 68%, I said, which you'd know if you hadn't buried my actual results. Retention doesn't matter if we're not growing. Heath slammed his hand on the table. Dad, you're so blinded by your old school mentality that you can't see what's happening in the industry. We need to evolve or die. Gerald studied his son with an expression I couldn't read. This isn't about strategy. This is about control. You wanted Nyla to fail because I hired her against your recommendation. I wanted someone qualified, Heath retorted. You wanted someone who wouldn't challenge you, Gerald corrected. Someone who would fail, proving me wrong and you right. When Nyla started succeeding despite your interference, you had to take more drastic measures. Heath turned to me, eyes blazing. You have no idea what it takes to keep this company competitive. While you're building your precious relationships, I'm fighting to keep us relevant. Is that why you diverted the resources for the Wilson contract to your division? I asked. Because nothing says competitive, like making sure your colleague doesn't have the tools to succeed. The board meets this afternoon, Gerald said with finality. They'll see everything we've uncovered. All of it, Heath. For the first time, I saw fear flicker across Heath's face. You'd side with her against your own son? Over what? Some budget reallocations? Administrative decisions that I made for the good of the company? No, Gerald replied, standing up. I'm siding with the truth against someone who betrayed my trust. Someone who was willing to destroy another person's career to feed his ego. Heath's laugh was bitter. Truth? Let's talk truth. You never thought I was good enough to run this company. You've been looking for my replacement since the day you made me COO. Well, congratulations. It looks like you found her. He stormed out, leaving Gerald and me in stunned silence. I never intended, Gerald began, then stopped. The board meeting is at 3. Be ready to present everything you've found. Alone in my office afterward, I tried to process what had happened. In a single morning, I'd gone from fighting for my career to being at the center of a corporate civil war. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My phone lit up with a message from Heath. This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started. I stared at those words, my throat tightening with dread, because despite the evidence on my side, I knew something Gerald didn't. Heath had friends on the board, powerful friends, and this battle was far from won. The 3 hours before the board meeting stretched like taffy. I paced my office, rehearsing my presentation, mentally preparing for every possible counter-argument Heath might throw at me. My stomach churned with each passing minute. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Paige from marketing stood in my doorway, concern etched across her face. Everyone's talking about what happened this morning, she said, closing the door behind her. Is it true Heath tried to get you fired? I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Office politics were treacherous enough without adding fuel to the gossip machine. It's complicated. Well, whatever's happening, you should know something. She lowered her voice. Heath's been in the conference room with board members Lillian and Danny for the past hour. My blood ran cold. Lillian and Danny were Heath's strongest allies on the board. Both had joined after making fortunes in aggressive growth startups. They shared his win-at-all-costs mentality. He's getting to them before the meeting, I realized aloud. Paige nodded. And he's brought binders. Lots of them. After she left, I called Gerald's office, but his assistant said he was unavailable. I was on my own. The Western Territory had been my life for 3 years. I'd spent weekends flying to neglected clients who hadn't seen a company representative in person for years. I'd rebuilt relationships one painful conversation at a time, apologizing for my predecessor's empty promises. I'd hired local talent who understood their communities instead of bringing in outsiders. The region was finally gaining momentum, and now everything teetered on the edge of collapse because of one man's ego. I thought back to when I first met Heath, during my final interview. While Gerald had been warm and engaged, Heath had barely looked up from his phone. "Western Territory is a money pit," he'd said dismissively, "but Dad's convinced it just needs the right touch." The way he'd said touch made it sound like a character flaw. After I was hired, Heath maintained a professional distance, cold but correct in meetings, never openly hostile. He'd even occasionally praise certain initiatives in front of others. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he was quietly dismantling everything I built. At 2:45, I gathered my materials and headed toward the boardroom. The hallway felt a mile long. Through the glass walls, I could see board members already taking their seats, 12 people who would decide my fate. Lillian and Danny were deep in conversation, occasionally glancing at documents in front of them. Gerald arrived just before 3, nodding briskly as he passed me. The deep lines around his eyes had deepened since morning. "Heath has been busy," I murmured. "I'm aware," Gerald replied. "Stick to the facts. The truth is on our side." But as we entered the room, the atmosphere told a different story. Several board members avoided eye contact. Heath sat with perfect posture, a picture of calm professionalism. Before him lay multiple neatly arranged binders with color-coded tabs. Board Chair Olivia called the meeting to order. "We understand there are serious allegations regarding resource allocation and performance reporting for the Western Territory. Gerald has requested this emergency session to address these concerns." Gerald started by explaining the discrepancies we'd discovered, methodically laying out the evidence of diverted resources and manipulated metrics. He was brilliant, clear, measured, authoritative. As he spoke, I watched the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to concern. Then it was my turn. I presented the true performance data for the Western Territory: client retention increases, growth in previously abandoned markets, improved satisfaction scores. The complete picture showed a division in recovery, not decline. Despite having my approved budget reduced by nearly 40% over 3 years, I concluded the Western Territory has reversed its decline and established a foundation for sustainable growth. Several board members were taking notes now, their expressions thoughtful. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope. Then Heath stood up. "I appreciate Nyla's passionate defense of her performance," he began, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "and my father's desire to protect his hire. But emotion shouldn't cloud our judgment." He distributed his binders to each board member. "What you're about to see is a comprehensive financial analysis of resource allocation across all divisions over the past 5 years. Yes, certain resources were redirected from the Western Territory, with full knowledge of our financial team." My heart sank as Heath methodically dismantled our narrative. According to his documents, every resource reallocation had been properly documented and approved through appropriate channels. He produced emails showing that I had been informed of budget adjustments, buried in lengthy monthly reports I'd received but admittedly hadn't fully digested. He presented comparative metrics, showing that even with adjusted resources, the Western Territory underperformed relative to investment. As for the improved client retention rates Nyla mentions, Heath continued, "They're measuring from an artificial low point. When you compare to industry averages rather than our previous rock-bottom numbers, we're still underperforming." The room's energy had shifted. Several board members who had seemed sympathetic now looked confused or skeptical. "Furthermore," Heath said, pulling out his final document, "I've prepared a projection of company-wide performance if we were to implement Nyla's relationship-focused approach across all territories." The resulting graph showed a dramatic decline in growth, with projected losses beginning in year 2. "This isn't personal," Heath insisted. "This is about the future of this company. My father built something remarkable, but markets evolve. Strategies must adapt. The Western Territory has become a testing ground for outdated methods at the expense of our overall health." When Heath finished, silence filled the room. Gerald looked stricken, blindsided by the thoroughness of Heath's counterattack. Board member Lillian spoke first. "If these numbers are accurate, we have serious concerns. Gerald, with all due respect, sentiment can't drive business decisions." "These numbers are manipulated," Gerald insisted. "Heath has created a paper trail to cover his actions." "That's a serious accusation," Danny said. "Are you suggesting your son falsified corporate documents?" The conversation was spiraling. Other board members began asking pointed questions, their tone growing increasingly skeptical of our claims. I watched in horror as our case unraveled. Perhaps, Olivia interjected, we should take a short recess to review these materials independently. As the board filed out, Heath remained behind, straightening his already immaculate papers. When we were alone, his mask slipped. I warned you, he said quietly. You should have accepted your failure gracefully. You're destroying your father's company, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Heath's laugh was hollow. I'm saving it from his sentimentality, and from people like you who enable it. He leaned closer. When this is over, you'll be gone, and eventually, Dad will thank me. During the 30-minute recess, I paced the hallway, mind racing. Heath's presentation had been devastatingly effective. He'd anticipated our evidence and prepared countermeasures for everything. Years of undermining me had been disguised as standard business procedures, each step documented to protect himself. Gerald emerged from his office, looking suddenly older. Heath was more thorough than I anticipated. He's lying, I insisted. Those approvals, those notifications, they're backdated or buried where no one would reasonably find them. The board deals in documentation, not intentions, Gerald replied wearily. Heath provided documentation. We provided accusations. A terrible realization dawned on me. You're giving up. Gerald didn't answer directly. Sometimes you have to accept defeat in one battle to win the war. When the board reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted decisively against us. Olivia outlined the board's preliminary thoughts. While some resource reallocations may have been questionable, there was insufficient evidence of deliberate sabotage. Furthermore, Heath's growth-focused approach had proven successful in the Eastern Territories, suggesting his strategic vision might better serve the company's future. We recommend a full performance review of all territorial strategies, Olivia concluded. In the meantime, Heath will temporarily oversee both Eastern and Western operations to ensure consistency. I sat there, numb with disbelief. Not only had Heath escaped consequences, but he'd also been rewarded with control over my territory. Everything I'd built would be dismantled within weeks. Gerald's face remained impassive, but the slight tremor in his hand betrayed his emotion. If that's the board's recommendation, we'll implement it immediately. Heath's victory smile was subtle but unmistakable. As the meeting adjourned, board members filed out, several avoiding eye contact with me. Only Olivia paused, her expression unreadable. This isn't personal, Nyla, she said quietly. We have a responsibility to shareholders. I understand, I replied, though I didn't. Not really. Later that evening, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the remnants of 3 years' work. My phone buzzed with a text from Gerald. My house, 9 p.m., come alone. Gerald's home was a modest craftsman house that belied his wealth. When I arrived, I found him in his study, a glass of bourbon in hand, looking out at the darkened garden. Heath is staying at the office late, he said without turning around. Going through your files, no doubt. Why did you give up? I asked, the question that had been burning inside me all afternoon. Gerald finally turned to face me. Because we can't win this fight with their weapons. So we just surrender? Let Heath destroy everything you've built? No. Gerald's eyes sharpened. We change the battlefield. He walked to his desk and unlocked a drawer, retrieving a small leather portfolio. Heath thinks he's won because he controls the narrative through documentation, but there are some things even he doesn't know about. Inside the portfolio was a slim flash drive and a handwritten letter. 26 years ago, I made Heath coup over my more qualified partner because he was my son. Thomas left the company, but gave me this before he went. He said someday I might need to remember what matters more than blood. Gerald handed me the flash drive. This contains original company documents, things Heath has no access to because they predate our digital systems, including the true ownership structure of our company. I looked at him, confused. I don't understand. Heath believes that upon my retirement, his position as COO automatically makes him CEO. But the company bylaws actually require a supermajority board vote for succession, something he's carefully hidden from current board members. More importantly, I never signed over my founding shares to him, as he's led the board to believe. Gerald's expression hardened. Heath has been operating under the assumption that he controls this company's future. He doesn't. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow everything changes. I've already contacted Thomas. After 26 years, he's ready to help me correct my mistake. As I left Gerald's house that night, clutching the flash drive that contained the company's true history, a strange mix of hope and dread filled me. Tomorrow would bring either resurrection or ruin. What I didn't know was that Heath had already made his next move, one that would force me to choose between my career and something far more important, and that choice would change everything. I arrived at the office before dawn the next morning, my mind replaying Gerald's words throughout a sleepless night. The security guard nodded as I badged in. He was used to my early arrivals. The building stood mostly empty, that liminal space before the workday begins when everything feels both abandoned and full of possibility. My office door was ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it the night before. Heart pounding, I pushed it open slowly. Everything looked untouched at first glance. Computer screen dark, papers stacked where I'd left them. Then I noticed my filing cabinet. The lock had been forced, the metal slightly bent around the keyhole. I rushed to check the contents, rifling through folders until I reached the back of the drawer. My personal backup drive was gone. That drive contained everything: client communications, meeting notes, project timelines, all the raw data I'd used to build my case against Heath. Without it, I had only the flash drive Gerald had given me, containing historical documents but nothing about Heath's recent manipulations. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Parking garage, level 3, now. I recognized the trap but went anyway. What choice did I have? The underground parking garage echoed with my footsteps as I approached level 3. A lone figure stood between two concrete pillars, face hidden in shadow. Did you really think you could win against me? Heath's voice bounced off the concrete walls. Where's my drive? I demanded, stopping several feet away. Heath stepped forward, twirling a small black device between his fingers. You know, I was impressed with how thoroughly you documented everything. Every email, every meeting, every resource request. Almost as if you were building a case from day one. I was protecting myself, I replied. Something told me I'd need to. Smart, he acknowledged with a cold smile. But not smart enough. He pocketed the drive. The board already doubts your claims. How will they react when they learn you've been secretly documenting confidential company information? That's grounds for immediate termination. You stole from my office, I countered. That's breaking and entering. Heath's laugh echoed in the empty garage. Your office belongs to the company. I'm the COO. Nothing was stolen. I was simply securing company property that you'd inappropriately removed from our servers. He was right. Technically, all those files belong to the company. I'd been careful to only include work-related communications on that drive, nothing personal. In trying to protect myself, I'd handed him a weapon. What do you want, Heath? Resignation letter on my desk by noon. Citing personal reasons, of course. No severance, no recommendations. His eyes glinted in the dim light. Walk away quietly, and this drive stays between us. Make any accusations, and I'll make sure the board sees you as a disgruntled employee who violated company policy. And if I refuse, then I'll destroy your career so thoroughly you won't find work managing a corner store. He checked his watch. You have 4 hours to decide. Choose wisely. After he left, I remained rooted to the spot, mind racing. If I resigned, Heath won completely. If I fought, he'd use my own documentation against me. And waiting for Gerald's plan felt increasingly like clinging to false hope. By 9, the office hummed with activity. I sat at my desk, staring at a blank resignation template on my screen. 3 hours until Heath's deadline. My phone rang. Gerald. We need to talk. Not in the office. Meet me at Riverside Park in 30 minutes. The morning air felt unusually crisp as I found Gerald on a bench overlooking the river. His shoulders slumped with the weight of invisible burdens. Heath took my backup drive, I said without preamble. He's demanding my resignation by noon. Gerald didn't look surprised. He came to my house last night, told me he was calling an emergency board meeting at 1 o'clock today to vote on removing me as CEO for health concerns. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? With enough board support, yes. He's been cultivating allies for years, positioning himself as the future. Yesterday's meeting showed how effective he's been. Gerald handed me a coffee he'd brought. Heath believes he's winning. And on paper, he is. So what do? We let him believe that until the very end. Gerald's expression hardened with resolve. The board meeting is our moment. Before then, I need you to do something that will feel wrong. What? Write that resignation letter. I stared at him, bewildered. You want me to quit? I want Heath to think you have quit, Gerald corrected. Submit the letter at 11:59. By then, everything else will be in place. What everything else? Gerald stood, checking his watch. I have spent the night calling in favors from people who remember what this company was built on. People Heath does not even know exist. He paused. Do you trust me, Nyla? The question hung between us. Did I trust this man I had known for only 3 years? Who was asking me to potentially sacrifice my career on faith alone? Yes, I said finally. I trust you. Then be in the boardroom at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Do not be early, do not be late, and bring the flash drive I gave you. Back at the office, I crafted the most professional resignation letter of my life, citing personal reasons as Heath demanded. At 11:58, I printed it. At 11:59, I placed it on Heath's empty desk, his assistant watching curiously. At 12:45, I received a company-wide email announcing an emergency board meeting regarding leadership transition. Heath was making his move against his father. At precisely 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I walked into the boardroom to find a tableau frozen in surprise. Heath stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence, while Gerald sat calmly to his right. The board members' expressions ranged from confusion to annoyance at my interruption. Miss Kemp, Olivia said stiffly, this is a closed board meeting. Miss Kemp is here at my request, came a voice from the doorway behind me. A tall man in his 70s entered, followed by 3 others I didn't recognize. The color drained from Heath's face. Thomas, he whispered. Gerald stood. Board members, this is Tomas Rivera, co-founder of this company and still majority shareholder, despite what some documentation might suggest. Murmurs rippled through the room. Tomas stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. I've been silent for 26 years out of respect for Gerald's wishes, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. That silence ends today. What followed was the most methodical dismantling of a person I'd ever witnessed. Tomas and his team, the company's original legal counsel and 2 forensic accountants, presented irrefutable evidence that Heath had been systematically falsifying documents for years. Not just about my territory, but about company ownership, board voting rights, and succession plans. The amendments to the company bylaws that supposedly granted automatic succession to the COO were never ratified, one accountant explained, displaying the original documents from Gerald's flash drive alongside Heath's altered versions, and the share transfer documents showing Mr. Reese signing over his founder's stake to his son are forgeries. With each revelation, Heath's carefully constructed reality crumbled. Board members who had supported him just yesterday now couldn't distance themselves fast enough. This isn't just about succession, Gerald said after the evidence had been presented. This is about the future of the company. Heath wanted to strip away everything we built in favor of short-term gains that would ultimately hollow us out. He turned to me. Nyla, would you please share what you found about the Western Territory? For 20 minutes, I walked the board through the true state of my region. The systematic sabotage, the diverted resources, the manipulated metrics. This time, with Tomas's team providing forensic verification, the board listened with growing horror. Throughout it all, Heath sat motionless, his face a mask of cold fury. When I finished, he finally spoke. This is a coordinated attack, he said, voice trembling slightly, orchestrated by a bitter old man who can't accept that his business model is obsolete. Who would rather destroy his son than acknowledge times have changed? This isn't about business models, Gerald replied quietly. This is about integrity, something you lost somewhere along the way. Heath's laugh was brittle. Integrity doesn't keep shareholders happy. Results do, and my methods get results. At what cost? Tomas asked. You've alienated employees, manipulated data, and sabotaged your own company to feed your ego. I did what was necessary, Heath insisted, glancing around for support that no longer existed. Every decision was for the good of this company. The board will need to deliberate on next steps, Olivia said, her voice carefully neutral. In the meantime, Heath, I believe it would be appropriate for you to take a leave of absence. A leave? Heath sputtered. I'm the coup. This company needs me. Actually, Gerald interjected, sliding a document across the table. You're not. This is your resignation letter, effective immediately. Heath stared at the paper. I'm not signing that. You don't need to, Gerald replied. The board can remove you with cause. I'm simply offering you the dignity of resignation. The silence that followed was absolute. Heath looked around the table, searching for allies and finding none. His carefully cultivated power base had evaporated in less than an hour. This isn't over, he said, standing abruptly. You'll regret this. All of you. As he stormed toward the door, I stepped into his path. For a moment, we stood face to face. The man who had tried to destroy me now destroyed himself. My backup drive, I said, holding out my hand. His eyes burned with hatred as he reached into his pocket and slammed the drive into my palm. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, he hissed. You've made an enemy today. No, I corrected him. You did that yourself, 3 years ago. After Heath left, the board voted unanimously to accept his resignation and appoint a special committee to investigate the full extent of his actions. Gerald announced his own phased retirement plan, with a proper succession process to follow. As the meeting concluded, Tomas approached me. Gerald speaks highly of you, says you understand what this company should be. I just did my job, I replied. From what I've seen, he said, you did far more than that. You stood your ground when most would have crumbled. 2 weeks later, Gerald called me to his office. The scandal had been contained to minimize market impact, with Heath's departure attributed to strategic differences. He'd already taken a position with a competitor, his reputation somehow intact despite everything. I'm restructuring the company, Gerald said without preamble. Eastern and Western territories will be consolidated under a single chief operating officer. I felt a pang of disappointment. After everything, my division would still be absorbed. I see, I managed. Who will be taking over? Gerald smiled for the first time in weeks. You will, Nyla, if you accept the position. 6 months later, I sat in what had been Heath's corner office, reviewing quarterly reports. Under unified leadership, both territories were thriving. My relationship-focused approach, combined with the best elements of Heath's growth strategy, had yielded results beyond projections. The intercom buzzed. Miss Kemp, there's a call for you on line 1. It was a representative from Heath's new company. They were struggling, hemorrhaging clients and talent. Heath had been asked to take a leave of absence pending an investigation into inconsistencies in his reporting. He suggested we speak with you about possible collaboration. The voice on the line explained uncomfortably. I smiled, twirling a pen between my fingers. I'm afraid my schedule is completely full for the foreseeable future. But please give Heath my regards. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's simply about allowing them to destroy themselves and then thriving in the space they leave behind. If this story of workplace vindication resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever dealt with someone who tried to undermine your work? How did you handle it? And if you enjoyed this journey of corporate intrigue and sweet justice, please like and subscribe for more stories of triumph against impossible odds. Sometimes the best revenge truly is living well, especially when you're doing it from your saboteur's former office. You're easily replaceable, Devin said, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating half-smile. The fluorescent lights of the small conference room highlighted the sheen of his gelled hair. Quality specialists like you are waiting in line outside. I could snap my fingers and have 3 candidates by tomorrow morning. The words stabbed through me like broken glass. 7 years at Midwest Manufacturing. 7 years of solving problems no one else could see. 7 years of watching products ship safely because of my eyes, my mind, my care. Your performance metrics are adequate, he continued, sliding a paper across the table. Hence the standard 1% adjustment in compensation. 1%. After I'd personally identified the micro flaw in the R7 model that would have caused catastrophic failures in hospitals nationwide. After my inspection, protocol improvements had saved the company millions in potential recalls just last quarter. Something to say, Willa? Devin asked, noticing my white knuckles gripping the edge of the table. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope I'd prepared just in case. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. My grandmother's motto. Find someone else then, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I placed my resignation letter before him. As per company policy, I'm giving 2 weeks' notice. Devin barely glanced at it. 2 weeks won't be necessary. We can process your departure today. There's an attachment, I said, nodding toward the second paper beneath my resignation. A transition guide. He didn't even look. We'll manage. Clear your desk by 5. 3 hours later, I walked out the main entrance. A small box of belongings in my arms. Security watched as I loaded them into my car, as if I might suddenly decide to steal industrial secrets after 7 loyal years. The attachment remained unread on Devin's desk. By the time anyone would think to look at it, I'd be long gone. What they didn't know was what I'd set in motion. What they couldn't possibly understand was exactly how irreplaceable I truly was. And in exactly 13 days, they were going to learn the hard way. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this plays out. Leave a comment with what you think happens next. I bet you won't see the real ending coming. My name is Willa Bryce, and until 3 hours ago, I was the Senior Quality Control Specialist at Midwest Manufacturing. Not the most glamorous title, but it was mine. I earned it. Growing up as the only child of a watchmaker in a small town had its advantages. Dad taught me to see the world differently, to notice the tiniest details others missed. While other kids played video games, I learned to disassemble and reassemble pocket watches blindfolded. When something broke in our house, I was the one who fixed it, analyzing the failure points and improving the design when I put it back together. People called me peculiar. Teachers said I was too precise and needed to loosen up. But precision was my comfort zone, my superpower. When everyone else saw a functioning machine, I saw the loose screw that would cause it to fail in exactly 17 days. I never planned to work at Midwest Manufacturing. With my engineering degree fresh in hand, I had interviews lined up with prestigious firms in Chicago and New York. Then Mom got sick. Cancer. The kind that didn't leave much time for goodbyes. So I stayed, taking the only technical job available within driving distance of the hospital. Assembly line worker. Entry level. Temporary, I told myself. On my third day, I noticed something wrong with the medical pump components coming down the line. A microscopic misalignment in the injection mold that would cause the pumps to deliver incorrect medication dosages over time. Not immediately, which made it more dangerous. The failure would occur after months of normal operation, when everyone trusted the equipment implicitly. I reported it to my supervisor, Tara. She ignored me. New girl making waves. I tried the floor manager, who told me to stay in my lane. Finally, I wrote a detailed analysis and slipped it under the plant manager's door. The next day, production halted. Emergency meetings filled the calendar. Teams of engineers huddled around testing equipment, verifying what I'd found. A week later, I was moved to quality control. A month after that, I became a specialist. Within a year, I had developed a multi-phase inspection system that caught problems no standard test could identify. My protocols became the backbone of the company's quality assurance program. For 6 years, things were good. I saved the company from 3 potential recalls. I prevented countless failures before products ever left the building. The old management team valued my work. They didn't always understand it, but they respected it. Then Apex Capital bought the company. New executives, new priorities, new buzzwords like streamlining and overhead reduction, and a new HR director named Devin Powell, with his MBA and his spreadsheets, and his complete inability to understand what actually happened on the production floor. From his first week, Devin had targeted my department. Quality costs, he'd announced in his first company-wide meeting. We need to balance thoroughness with efficiency. Translation: cut corners wherever possible. I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the red brick building that had been my second home for 7 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara, now a production supervisor. "They're crazy to let you go. Need anything?" I didn't answer. What could I say? That I felt hollow? That despite knowing this day might come, I wasn't prepared for how much it would hurt? I started the engine and drove. No destination in mind. The spring afternoon was deceptively cheerful. All budding trees and birdsong. I ended up at Lakeside Park, where I sometimes ate lunch on good weather days. Sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I finally let myself feel everything. The anger, the betrayal, the strange relief. 7 years of my life, dismissed in 3 minutes. My expertise, my dedication, my literal blood. That time I sliced my hand fixing a jammed conveyor, all easily replaceable. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. Same number. Then again. Finally, I answered. "Willa?" "It's Chen from engineering." His voice was tight, stressed. There's something wrong with the new shipment tests. The protocols are giving inconsistent results. I almost laughed. I don't work there anymore, Chen. What? Since when? Since about 2 hours ago. Devin decided I'm easily replaceable. Silence on the line. But the Northside Hospital order ships tomorrow. We need your sign-off. Not my problem anymore. Call Devin. I hung up, a strange lightness filling my chest. Not my problem. For the first time in 7 years, whatever crisis erupted at Midwest Manufacturing would be someone else's responsibility. My phone immediately buzzed with texts. Chen. Please call me back. This is serious. Tara. The QC team is panicking. What did you do? Lynn from production. Did you change the testing parameters before leaving? I turned off my phone and watched the lake ripple in the breeze. They would figure it out. Or they wouldn't. Either way, I was free. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and did something I hadn't done in years. Absolutely nothing. No reports to review. No procedures to update. No midnight calls about production line emergencies. I slept for 10 hours straight. When I turned my phone back on the next morning, I had 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most from Midwest Manufacturing employees. 3 from Devin himself. His voicemail was terse. Willa, call me immediately regarding the testing protocols. This is urgent. The satisfaction I felt was probably petty. Okay, definitely petty. But after being told I was dispensable, hearing the panic in his voice was vindicating. I didn't call back. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began updating my resume. 7 years at one company looked good. The specific accomplishments I could list looked even better. Around noon, my doorbell rang. Tara stood on my porch, looking frazzled. You need to come back, she said without preamble. The entire QC department is in chaos. I don't work there anymore, I reminded her, leaning against the doorframe. Devin made that very clear. The Northside order failed final inspection. Nobody understands why. The readings make no sense. Did anyone read my transition guide? Tara blinked. Of course. The attachment Devin had ignored. I left detailed instructions for whoever replaced me. It was attached to my resignation letter. Devin never mentioned any guide. He's been running around blaming the engineering team, who are blaming the production team, who are blaming the materials suppliers. I shrugged. Sounds like a management problem. Willa, please, we've worked together for years. At least tell me what's happening with the testing equipment. I hesitated. Tara had always been decent to me, even when we disagreed. Nothing's wrong with the equipment, I said finally. The problem is that nobody else understands the inspection sequences. The system works fine if you follow the exact protocols I developed. Can you write them down or talk me through them? I did write them down. In the transition guide, Tara looked desperate. They're talking about recall contingencies, Willa. This could cost millions. For a moment, I wavered. These were medical devices. Devices that saved lives. Then I remembered Devin's smug face. You're easily replaceable. I offered 2 weeks to train my replacement, I said quietly. That offer was declined. Tara's phone buzzed. What? I asked. The backup testing also failed. They're stopping all shipments effective immediately. As she rushed back to her car, I closed my door and leaned against it, heart racing. The company that had discarded me was now facing exactly what I had prevented for 7 years. A quality crisis. I should have felt bad. Instead, I felt something stirring inside me. Something like power. My phone rang again. Devin. This time, I answered. We need you to come in, he said, his voice clipped. As a consultant. One day, standard contractor rate. I'm afraid I'm busy today, I replied, surprised at my own confidence. Tomorrow then, double the standard rate. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably long. I'll need to check my schedule, I finally said. I'll get back to you. I hung up before he could respond. 7 years of loyalty had earned me a 1% raise and a dismissive exit. 24 hours of absence had earned me a consulting offer at double rates. The realization crystallized something in my mind. A plan began to form. Not just for tomorrow, but for the weeks and months ahead. They thought I was replaceable. I was about to prove just how wrong they were. And Devin Powell had no idea what was coming. That night, I dreamed of broken machines and Devin's face twisted in panic. I woke up smiling. By morning, my phone showed 15 more missed calls. The production line had been shut down completely, an unprecedented move that cost the company tens of thousands for every idle hour. The transition guide remained unread on Devin's desk, buried under crisis management paperwork. I spent the day drafting polished versions of my resume and researching companies that might appreciate my particular skills. Around noon, my doorbell rang again. This time, it wasn't Tara. It was Alan Bennett, the company president. "May I come in?" he asked, standing awkwardly on my porch in his tailored suit, looking distinctly out of place in my modest neighborhood. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Alan had always been fair in our limited interactions. Before Apex Capital's takeover, he'd personally thanked me after I'd prevented the R7 model disaster. "Coffee?" I offered, leading him to my small kitchen table. "Please." He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, and his usually immaculate silver hair slightly disheveled. As I prepared the coffee, he cleared his throat. "I only learned about your departure yesterday evening." "Interesting," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, "since it happened 2 days ago. Devin didn't inform senior management until the production issues became impossible to hide." Alan accepted the mug I offered. "Willa, I'll be direct. We need you back. As a consultant, for double the standard rate?" I quoted Devin's offer. Alan winced. "I'm not here to offer you a consulting position. I'm here to offer you your job back, with a significant adjustment to your compensation and title." He slid a folder across my table. Inside was an employment contract for Director of Quality Assurance, with a salary nearly triple my previous one. "You'd report directly to me," Alan continued, "complete authority over your department. And," he hesitated, "Devin has been instructed to issue a formal apology." I sipped my coffee, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. "What exactly is happening at the plant?" I finally asked. Alan's professional composure cracked slightly. 3 failed inspections. Production completely halted. The North Side order, worth nearly $7 million, is in jeopardy. Nobody understands your quality verification system well enough to troubleshoot it. Did anyone read my transition guide? Alan blinked. "What guide?" I almost laughed. "The attachment to my resignation letter. It contained detailed instructions for whoever took over my position." "I've never seen any guide. Devin said you left without any knowledge transfer." Now I did laugh, a short, bitter sound. "Of course he did. Is there a copy you could provide?" Alan asked, leaning forward. "I have one," I admitted. "But I'm curious. What happens if I decline your offer?" Alan set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. "Conservatively, a recall of 6 months' worth of production, potential lawsuits, significant layoffs at the plant while we rebuild our quality protocols from scratch." The weight of his words hung in the air. Hundreds of people worked at that plant. People like Tara and Chen, who had always treated me with respect. People with families and mortgages and dreams. "I need time to consider," I said. Alan nodded and stood. 24 hours. Please." He handed me his card with his personal cell number scrawled on the back. "Call me directly with your decision." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the employment contract. The salary was impressive. The title, validating. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Kelsey from accounting. Just heard what happened. Before you decide anything, you should know Devin's been telling everyone you sabotaged the QC systems before leaving. Thought you should know." I felt a cold fury building inside me. Sabotage? After 7 years of protecting that company from exactly that kind of disaster? I picked up my phone and dialed Alan's number. "I'll come in tomorrow," I said when he answered. "Not as an employee, as a consultant. 1 day only. Standard rate." "Willa." "Those are my terms. I'll help resolve the current crisis. After that, we can discuss future arrangements." A pause. Agreed. The next morning, I dressed with unusual care. Charcoal slacks, crisp white blouse, the good blazer I saved for special occasions. I swept my normally practical ponytail into a sleek chignon and applied makeup with precision. If I was walking back into that building, I would do it on my terms, looking nothing like the shell-shocked woman who had carried her personal items out in a box 3 days earlier. The security guard did a double take when I arrived, hastily checking his clipboard before waving me through. In the lobby, Alan was waiting with Tara and Jin from engineering. "Thank you for coming," Alan said, extending his hand. "The situation has escalated overnight. Where's my transition guide?" I asked, ignoring his outstretched hand. Alan glanced at Tara, who shook her head. "We've searched Devon's office," she said. "It's not there." "Convenient," I murmured. "Let's see the production floor." The atmosphere in the facility was tense. Workers stood in clusters, talking in low voices. The usual rhythmic hum of machinery was absent, creating an eerie silence in a space designed to be in constant motion. The quality control lab was worse, a scene of barely controlled chaos. Technicians huddled around testing equipment, arguing about calibration settings. Sample products were scattered across every surface. In the center of it all stood Devon, issuing contradictory instructions to increasingly frustrated staff. He froze when he saw me. "Willa," he managed, his expression a mixture of relief and wariness. "Thank you for—" "I'm not here for you." I cut him off. "I'm here for them." I gestured to the anxious technicians. "Everyone except Devon. Gather around, please." The team assembled, their faces showing various degrees of desperation. I recognized most of them, had trained many personally. "The quality verification system is working exactly as designed," I began. "The problem isn't the equipment, it's the sequence." For the next hour, I walked them through the basic principles of my inspection protocol. Not the complete system, just enough to get the critical Northside order tested and shipped. I answered questions, corrected misunderstandings, and watched as comprehension gradually replaced confusion on their faces. By noon, they had successfully run the first batch of tests. By 2, the Northside order had passed inspection and was being prepared for shipping. Devon hovered at the edges of these sessions, attempting to look involved while contributing nothing. Each time he tried to interject, I deliberately turned my back to him, focusing on the technicians who were actually doing the work. At 3 o'clock, Alan called me to his office. "You've saved us from disaster," he said, genuine gratitude in his voice. "The board has authorized me to make you an offer significantly above what we discussed yesterday." He named a figure that made my eyebrows rise. "With full departmental authority," he added, "and a seat on the executive committee." I leaned back in my chair. "And Devon?" Alan hesitated. "He's valuable in other areas of HR, so he stays, with a formal reprimand in his file, and he'll have no authority over your department." I nodded slowly, as if considering the offer. "May I use your computer for a moment?" Surprised, Alan turned his monitor toward me. I typed quickly, accessing my personal cloud storage. I printed 2 copies of a document, handing one to Alan. "This is my transition guide, the one I attached to my resignation letter." Alan skimmed the detailed 20-page document, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "This would have prevented everything that happened this week." "Yes. And you say Devon had this?" "It was attached to my resignation letter. He chose not to share it." Alan's face hardened. He pressed his intercom. "Send Devon Powell to my office immediately." While we waited, I gathered my belongings. "You're leaving?" Alan asked, surprised. "My consulting day is nearly over." "But we haven't concluded our discussion about your return." I smiled faintly. "I'll be in touch with my decision tomorrow." Devon arrived just as I was preparing to leave. He faltered slightly seeing me there, but quickly recovered, smoothing his tie with manicured fingers. "You wanted to see me, Alan? Explain this." Alan pushed the transition guide across his desk. Devon glanced at it, his expression carefully neutral. "I've never seen this document before. It was attached to my resignation letter," I said quietly. "The one you barely looked at before telling me I could leave immediately." There was no attachment, Devin insisted, a faint sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. I reached into my bag and withdrew a third copy of the guide. This is my personal copy. Note the timestamp on the digital signature, created 3 days ago, before I resigned. Devin's face flushed. I never received this. So you're suggesting I'm lying? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I'm saying there's been a misunderstanding. Alan had been watching this exchange with growing displeasure. A misunderstanding that nearly cost us millions, that risked our relationship with our largest client, that shut down production for 3 days. Devin swallowed hard. I followed standard separation protocols. By failing to notify senior management of a key employee's departure for over 24 hours, Alan's voice had taken on a steely quality I'd never heard before. By telling the accounting department she sabotaged our systems, Devin paled. I never... Save it, Alan snapped. We'll continue this discussion privately. He turned to me. Willa, please reconsider our offer. The company needs you. I nodded noncommittally and walked out, feeling Devin's eyes burning into my back. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel was muted, complicated by seeing the genuine distress of former colleagues I respected. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. Whatever you decide, you showed everyone who's really irreplaceable today. On the drive home, I considered my options. Alan's offer was generous. The vindication of seeing Devin squirm had been satisfying. The easiest path would be to accept the promotion, return triumphant, and lord my new authority over Devin until he eventually left. But something about that scenario felt hollow, incomplete. At a stoplight, my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Willa Bryce? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes. Who's this? My name is Zoe Cantrell. I'm the Vice President of Operations at Precision Medical Devices. Your name came up in a conversation with one of our suppliers yesterday. I understand you might be between opportunities right now. I felt a flicker of interest. That's correct. I'd like to discuss a potential position with our company. Would you be available for dinner this evening? The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, a new possibility taking shape in my mind. I'm available, I said. Where and when? By the time I arrived at Riverside Bistro to meet Zoe, I had done my research. Precision Medical was Midwest Manufacturing's largest competitor, smaller, but growing rapidly and known for innovation. Their quality standards were legendary in the industry. Zoe was already seated, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with cropped silver hair and an air of efficient competence. She stood to greet me with a firm handshake. Thank you for meeting on such short notice, she said as we settled at the table. Industry gossip travels fast, and when I heard Midwest had lost their quality specialist, I was intrigued. How did you hear about me specifically? I asked, genuinely curious. Zoe smiled. 3 of our biggest clients use both our products and Midwest's. They've mentioned for years that Midwest's quality verification was exceptional, better than the industry standard. When those same clients called yesterday in a panic because Midwest had halted shipments due to quality concerns, I started asking questions. Our conversation flowed easily. Zoe asked intelligent questions about my processes and listened intently to my answers. By dessert, she had outlined a position that seemed tailor-made for my skills, Director of Quality Systems, reporting directly to her, with a team of specialists under my direction. The salary is competitive, she said, sliding a folder across the table. I opened it and nearly choked on my coffee. The figure was 20% higher than Alan's already generous offer. This seems exceptional, I managed. We value exceptional people, Zoe replied simply, and we'd like you to bring your quality verification system to us exclusively. The implications sank in slowly. You want my inspection protocols. We want you. The protocols come with you. We're prepared to patent them in your name, with you as the primary beneficiary of any licensing agreements. My mind raced with possibilities. My inspection system, formally recognized and protected. My name on the patents. I should tell you, I said carefully, that Midwest has made me a substantial offer to return. Zoe nodded, unsurprised. Of course they have. They're desperate. But I have to ask, after they dismissed you as easily replaceable, do you really want to go back? Even with more money and a better title, you'll always be the person they only valued after they lost you. Her words hit me with unexpected force. She was right. Going back would mean living with the knowledge that my worth was only recognized after I was gone. I need time to consider, I said. Of course, but don't take too long. Zoe handed me her card. We'd like you to start next week. Zoe, that night I sat on my porch swing, weighing my options as the sunset painted the sky in dramatic oranges and purples. Return to Midwest, where I had history, where I knew every machine and process intimately. Accept their belated recognition and increased status. Watch Devon squirm under my new authority. Or join Precision. Start fresh, build something new, own my intellectual property properly for the first time. Never again wonder if I was truly valued. My phone buzzed with a text from Alan. The board has authorized an additional 10% above our offer. Please call me in the morning with your decision. As darkness fell, a plan crystallized in my mind. Not just for tomorrow, but for the months ahead. A plan that would prove once and for all exactly how irreplaceable I truly was. And Devon Powell would never see it coming. I woke at dawn the next morning, my decision made. I called Alan first. I appreciate the offer, I told him, but I'm declining. A long pause. May I ask why? I was replaceable 3 days ago. Now I'm suddenly invaluable. That's not a foundation I want to build on. Willa. Mistakes were made. Yes, they were. Goodbye, Alan. I hung up and immediately called Zoe at Precision. I'd like to accept your offer, I said when she answered. With one condition. I'm listening. I need 30 days before I start. Zoe hesitated. May I ask why? I have a personal project to complete, and I need to document my quality verification system properly. Understandable. 30 days is acceptable. I'll have HR prepare the paperwork. My next call was to a business attorney who specialized in intellectual property. I explained my situation and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. By noon, I had cleared my small home office and covered one wall with a large whiteboard. For the first time in 7 years, I began documenting my complete quality verification system. Not the simplified version I had shown the technicians yesterday, but the full, complex methodology I had developed through years of observation and refinement. Every sequence, every calibration setting, every checkpoint and failsafe. All the knowledge I had kept primarily in my head, sharing only the operational basics with the QC team at Midwest. The attorney, Melinda, arrived promptly at 2. I explained my situation while she took careful notes. So, you developed this quality verification system while employed at Midwest Manufacturing, she clarified. Yes, but it wasn't part of my job description. I was hired as a line worker and later promoted to quality control. Creating a new inspection methodology wasn't in my contracted duties. Melinda considered this. That creates an interesting gray area. Did you ever sign an intellectual property agreement? I shook my head. My original employment contract was basic. When I was promoted, the title and compensation changed, but nothing else. And your system isn't documented in company materials? Only partially. Basic operational guidelines, not the underlying methodology. She made a final note. We have grounds to file for patent protection in your name. There will likely be a challenge from Midwest, but their position is weakened by their failure to properly document and secure your work while you were employed there. For the next week, I worked with Melinda to file preliminary patent applications for my quality verification system. We carved it into distinct processes, each potentially patentable on its own. By Friday, the first filings were complete. Meanwhile, I fielded daily calls from Alan, each more desperate than the last. I let most go to voicemail, but answered one on day 6. The production line is still down, he said without preamble. We've brought in 3 consultants. None can fully replicate your process. That's unfortunate, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Name your price, Willa. Whatever it takes. It's not about the money, Alan. Then what is it about? I considered how to answer. Respect, recognition, understanding that some people aren't as replaceable as they might seem. He seized on this. We recognize that now. The board is prepared to offer you a vice presidency. Too late, I said simply, and hung up. On day 9, Tara texted me. Devin's been demoted. Now working in the records department in the basement. I smiled at that, but didn't reply. On day 12, my doorbell rang. A courier delivered an envelope containing formal job offers from 3 of Midwest's competitors, all clearly having heard about my availability. I filed them away without responding. On day 15, I drove to the small cafe across from Midwest Manufacturing during lunch hour. I sat by the window, watching employees file out for their breaks. Their faces showed the strain of the ongoing crisis, the tightness around eyes, the quick, nervous movements. I recognized that look. It was the expression of people worried about their futures, their jobs. Guilt nagged at me. My quarrel wasn't with the line workers or engineers. They weren't responsible for Devin's actions or the company's failure to value my contribution until it was too late. Tara spotted me through the window and came inside, sliding into the seat across from me. You look well, she said, studying my face. Better than the rest of us. How bad is it? I asked. She sighed heavily. Production's partially restarted, but quality rejections are through the roof. We're shipping at maybe 30% capacity. The board is meeting daily. Rumors about layoffs are everywhere. My stomach tightened. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Her tone wasn't accusatory, just tired. You could fix this, Willa. You could save hundreds of jobs. That's not my responsibility anymore. Maybe not. But these people have families, mortgages. They didn't do anything wrong. She left before I could respond, leaving me with an uncomfortable weight in my chest. That evening, I stared at my whiteboard, at the detailed documentation of my life's work. Was I punishing the wrong people? Was my revenge against Devin and the company that undervalued me hurting innocent bystanders? I called Zoe. I have a hypothetical question, I said when she answered. If I were to license my quality verification system to other companies while working for Precision, would that be acceptable? A thoughtful pause. Ordinarily no, but in your case, it might be arranged. Under certain conditions. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the human cost of what's happening at Midwest. Ah. She understood immediately. You're concerned about the workers. Yes, a limited licensing arrangement might be possible. But Willa, don't give away what you've earned. Whatever you decide, make sure it's on your terms. Her words stayed with me as I formulated the next phase of my plan. On day 17, I called Alan and requested a meeting. Not at Midwest, but at a neutral location, a conference room at the downtown library. He agreed immediately. When we met the following morning, I brought Melinda with me. Alan arrived with Midwest's corporate counsel, a nervous-looking man named Grant. Thank you for meeting, Alan began, looking haggard. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his normally impeccable suit appeared slept in. We're prepared to discuss any terms. I held up my hand. I'm not here to negotiate employment. I've accepted a position with Precision Medical Devices. Alan's face fell. Grant shifted uncomfortably in his chair. However, I continued, I'm prepared to offer Midwest Manufacturing a licensing agreement for my quality verification system. I slid copies of my patent applications across the table. Grant picked one up, skimming it with growing alarm. You've filed for patents? He asked, his voice strained. Yes, my attorney can explain the legal basis for my ownership claim. Melinda outlined our position calmly and methodically. As she spoke, Grant's expression shifted from disbelief to resignation. The licensing terms are non-negotiable, I said when she finished. 20% of the system's demonstrated annual value to Midwest, calculated as the difference between your current rejection rates and the rates achieved under my system. Initial term of 5 years, renewable at my discretion. Alan looked stunned. That could be millions. Yes, it could. The board will never agree. I gathered my papers. Then I wish you luck finding another solution. Wait, Alan said quickly. What about the workers? The people who depend on those jobs? I met his gaze steadily. That's why I'm offering a license at all, instead of simply walking away. But I won't undervalue my work again. 20% is fair. It's your choice. As we left the meeting, Melinda smiled. That was impressively done. They'll accept. How can you be sure? Because they have no choice, and they know it. 3 days later, Grant called Melinda. The board had approved my terms. The licensing agreement would be ready for signature within the week. On day 25, I received a text from an unknown number. This is Kelsey from accounting again. Thought you'd want to know. Devin's been assigned to administer your licensing payments. He's furious but can't refuse the assignment. I laughed out loud at the perfect poetry of it. The man who had deemed me easily replaceable would now spend his days calculating and processing payments that recognized my irreplaceable value. On day 29, I drove to Midwest Manufacturing one last time, not as an employee or consultant, but as a business partner. The security guard smiled uncertainly as he issued me a visitor badge. In the conference room, Alan, Grant, and several board members waited with the final licensing documents. Conspicuously absent was Devin. The signing took less than 20 minutes. As we concluded, I asked casually, "Will Devin be managing the licensing relationship?" Alan looked uncomfortable. "Yes. He's been reassigned to vendor management." "Perfect," I said, smiling. "I look forward to our quarterly reviews." As I walked through the production floor toward the exit, I saw the line workers watching me curiously. Production had resumed at partial capacity, with the first implementation of my license system underway. Near the quality control lab, I spotted Tara supervising a testing sequence. She approached me, arms folded. "So, you found a way to help without coming back." It seemed like the best solution for everyone. She studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "The company underestimated you in every possible way, didn't they?" "They did." "Will you be back to oversee the implementation?" "No, the documentation is comprehensive, and I start my new job on Monday." Tara extended her hand. "Good luck, Willa, and thank you for not burning it all down." "You could have." I shook her hand, surprised by the sudden tightness in my throat. "Take care of them," I said, nodding toward the workers on the line. "I will." As I walked to the main exit, a familiar figure emerged from a side corridor. Devin, carrying a stack of folders, his formerly pristine appearance now rumpled and harried. He froze when he saw me. For a moment, we just looked at each other. I saw the recognition in his eyes, the dawning understanding of exactly how thoroughly he had misjudged me. "Hello, Devin," I said pleasantly. "I understand we'll be working together on the licensing agreement." He swallowed hard. "Yes, that's correct. I look forward to our first quarterly review. I'll need detailed reports on implementation progress, quality metrics, and of course, accurate calculations of the licensing fees." "Of course," he muttered. "You'll find all the instructions in the documentation. I'm sure someone as capable as you won't have any trouble following them." His face flushed at the deliberate echo of his dismissive attitude toward me. "One more thing," I added, unable to resist the final twist of the knife. "Do you remember what you said to me during my last performance review?" He looked away. "I said many things. You said I was easily replaceable. That quality specialists like me were waiting in line outside." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "How's the search for my replacement going, Devin?" He had no answer. "For the next 5 years, minimum, you'll be processing payments to me that will likely exceed your annual salary. Each quarter, you'll document exactly how essential my work is to this company's survival. And every time you sign one of those reports, I want you to remember what you said to me in that conference room." I stepped back, smiling pleasantly. "Have a nice day." As I walked out into the sunshine, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying lifted from my shoulders. My revenge wasn't about destroying Midwest or even ruining Devin's career. It was about establishing my true value, on my terms. On Monday morning, I started at Precision, bringing my expertise to a company that recognized its worth from the beginning. Within 6 months, I had built a team that implemented enhanced versions of my quality systems, pushing precision standards even higher. Meanwhile, Midwest struggled to rebuild. Their products shipped again, but at reduced capacity and higher costs, 20% of which came to me quarterly in checks signed by Devin Powell. By year's end, Precision had captured 15% of Midwest's market share. Analysts pointed to our superior quality controls as the differentiating factor. My patents were approved, cementing my professional reputation and financial security. At the industry's annual conference, I ran into Alan. He looked aged beyond the single year that had passed. "You could have destroyed us," he said quietly during a break between sessions. "That was never my goal." "What was your goal then?" I considered the question carefully. "To be valued appropriately. To never again be considered easily replaceable." He nodded slowly. "Mission accomplished, I'd say." Devin submits his quarterly reports on your licensing agreement with remarkable thoroughness. I think it's the only part of his job he actually fears getting wrong. I smiled at that. The perfect punishment for the man who had dismissed my precision and attention to detail. Being forced to apply those same qualities to calculating my value, quarter after quarter, year after year. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's forcing them to acknowledge your worth, over and over again, while you move forward into something better. As for me, I'm no longer worried about being replaceable. I've built something that speaks for itself, a legacy of quality that bears my name and my patents. My systems protect patients in hospitals across the country. My team at Precision treats me with the respect I've earned. And every 3 months, I receive a reminder of how wrong Devin was, in the form of a check that grows larger each quarter, as the licensing terms capture the true value of what I created. That's the thing about being irreplaceable. Once you truly understand your worth, no one can ever take it away from you again. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about a time when someone underestimated your value and how you proved them wrong. Hit the like button if you've ever wanted to show someone exactly how irreplaceable you really are, and subscribe for more stories about getting the recognition you deserve. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't just walking away. It's succeeding so spectacularly that they never forget what they lost.